I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
35. We've had some snow flurries at O'Hare. 36 Lakefront. Your next news update is at 7:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Don't miss the ammo event this weekend at Shoot Point Blank. Pick up great deals on ammo, like 50 rounds of 9mm as low as $10.99 per box. The more ammo you buy, the more you save. Load up this weekend at Shoot Point Blank's ammo event. See store for details.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. A few weeks back, on the occasion of the promoting his book, Call Sign Chaos, I believe was the name of it, General James Mattis did a sit-down with CBS Sunday Morning for an interview with David Martin. Had this to say about his reason for resigning as Secretary of Defense.
You resigned the day after the president announced that the U.S. was pulling all its troops out of Syria.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did that decision have anything to do with your...
Absolutely it did.
But what about the decision to withdraw from Syria?
I disagree with it.
Because?
Because we need to maintain enough influence there that we don't see the same thing that happened when we withdrew from Iraq.
Mattis, despite much prodding and cajoling, would, however, not break bad on the president.
I will not speak ill of a sitting president. I'm not going to do it.
But he will say this.
He's an unusual president, our president is, and I think that especially with the rabid nature of politics today, we got to be careful. We could tear this country apart.
For more on the General's commentary, I'm pleased to be joined by Guy Snodgrass, who's a retired American Naval Aviator, Top Gun graduate and instructor, and he was a former chief speechwriter to the aforesaid Secretary James Mattis. He has a book, Holding the Line, Inside Trump's Pentagon with Secretary Mattis. Guy, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, pleasure. And the remarks that General Mattis gave a few weeks back about some policy disagreements with the president, most notably the Syrian withdrawal, and his concerns about our politics. Are those, particularly the latter one, concern about the nature of our politics and having to operate in advance of America's national security in that environment? Was that a topic of conversation a lot between you and the general?
You know, it's something we always kept our eyes on. One thing that the general was adamant about was that those of us in the Department of Defense, we serve at the pleasure of the president. And so we had to make sure, as he would say, that there was not 1 inch of daylight between what the White House was saying and what we at the Pentagon were saying. And that's one of the reasons why whenever I approached my own book, Holding the Line, I wanted to take that apolitical approach. There's a lot in the book for your listeners to enjoy. As Secretary Mattis points out, President Trump is a non-traditional politician, but people elected him into office to come in and shake things up. And they're going to get a chance to see behind the scenes how he does that.
Well, what do our allies around the world really think of President Trump's administration?
I think the concern for allies around the world is simply that traditionally you have this back channel diplomacy. Everyone understands that as a politician, President Trump needs to communicate effectively, not only with his base, but with all Americans. And to do so, he uses rallies, he uses campaign events, and he'll use, as we all know, Twitter to send out announcements. Typically, in years past, you could do that, but you're working furiously behind the scenes in order to get everything aligned and set and ready to go so that you don't catch your own administration, let alone your allies and partners, off guard. And that is one area that I feel that there could be some improvement. And what I highlight in the book is that whether it's our allies and partners in Europe or in Indo-Pacific, in the Middle East, you know, countries we've fought alongside for decades, we could be doing a better job of making sure that they're not caught off guard by these announcements.
It was sort of thinking back at the beginning of the administration, and people remarking upon how many generals were members of President Trump's cabinet. And then, of course, you also had General Kelly serve as his chief of staff, all these generals. And And then people sort of concerned, are there too many generals? Well, there's not too many generals now. And I wonder if part of that is just a culture clash. What you're describing, how the president operates, what we all understand from his very public persona, and military culture. It's just it's a bit of oil and water, isn't it?
It is different. And I had a really telling conversation with a former Congresswoman from South Carolina shortly after I left Mattis's office and right after I had retired from my 2 decades of naval service. And she kind of chuckled when I was sharing with her some of the behind the scenes experiences I've had. And she said, oh my gosh, if you think about your experience as a naval officer, for 2 decades, your job was to build the best team you could. You did that by maximizing everyone's strengths. And just by the nature of politics, it's basically the reverse. You want to understand what your adversary's weaknesses are so that you can exert leverage to get the policies through that will represent your constituents. And I thought that was a very telling difference. I think that the good part of having, whether it's generals or others who have served in uniform before, you're going to get their straightforward, honest advice and counsel. But as we all know, at the end of the day, it's President Trump's decision to make. And once he's made that decision, everyone needs to step in the line.
Is he been unfairly criticized for his antagonism towards the intelligence community? And it's usually specific people. It's not law enforcement or the Pentagon or CIA specifically. But it was interesting what Mike Pompeo had to say recently at an appearance at the Hudson Institute. He said when he first took the helm at CIA, I'll never forget what President Trump was focused on. Literally less than 24 hours after he had been sworn in, he was sitting with me and the senior counterterrorism team at the CIA, and he told me 3 things. He said, I'm going to give you everything you need to do. I'm going to give you the authorities you need to conduct the campaign in a way that will keep Americans safe. And I want to make sure that we destroy the caliphate. I want you to get the guy who's the leader of ISIS. And we worked for 2.5 years. The team was fantastic, said Pompeo. Is that your experience, or is that consistent with how Trump sort of gives you top line authority and you fill in the blanks as experts in your fields, and I'll be there to back your play? Is that your experience, what Pompeo's describing?
I think in many circumstances it was. In the book, I spent an entire chapter talking about our military campaign to, as you just stated, defeat the physical caliphate for ISIS. Of course, this is a terrorist group that has wreaked havoc around the world. And President Trump turned to Secretary Mattis and said, you've got it. Whatever you need, the resources you need for the military, the authorities that the military commanders need in the field, we don't want to simply defeat ISIS. We want to annihilate ISIS, because we don't want those terrorists to then go out and, of course, wreak even more havoc in the future. We want this defeated now. And so I think that there were a lot of great examples in the book of where President Trump gave the authorities that were needed to make that happen. One thing I will step back to, though, and you highlighted this in the clip you played at the beginning of our conversation with Secretary Mattis, and that is sometimes in this hot political environment where there's so much rhetoric being tossed about, organizations like the U.S. military or the intelligence community can kind of get drug into those partisan fights. And I think there is some danger there when you start to politicize traditionally apolitical institutions, because that erosion of trust and confidence with the American public can have a lasting effect. So you might use it 1 week, 1 month to kind of beat some people up, but that impact could last for years. And I think that's something that we should be mindful of.
And did you mention in your book how and why Mattis decided to resign?
Yes, I sure do. As the clip you played hints at, he says that he resigned solely because of the president's announced withdrawal from Syria at the end of last year. What I do is I bring the readers in behind the scenes where in the summer of 2018, almost 6 months before he resigned, he had, in this case, Secretary Mattis had met with General John Kelly and said that, look, I need to leave. Too many policy differences. I'm not being effective. And so General Kelly was going to remain as chief of staff and Secretary Mattis was going to depart. So I bring the reader in, not just for that scene, but for the first time that President Trump came to the Pentagon, and your listeners get a chance to see what he's like behind closed doors, how he leads America's military. And the same thing when he came back again about 6 months later, and we were discussing with the president issues about our nuclear weapons and our security around the world.
What's your estimation of General Mattis? Tell us who General Mattis is, what kind of man he is.
The thing that I've always enjoyed about General Mattis is that, what you see is what you get. In public venues, he's very stoic, meaning he's reserved. He's incredibly laser focused on the task at hand, and he does not want to get caught up in political matters. He spent 43 years as a Marine Corps officer, culminating with being promoted to 4 stars. He ran the entire U.S. Central Command that, of course, controls the majority of the Middle East and even over into Afghanistan. So this is a person who has had a great deal of military responsibility throughout his lifetime and has served his country tirelessly. And I like the fact that behind the scenes, he was very much the same kind of individual. He stayed laser focused on the task at hand. He may have felt at times that the president was not taking his policy recommendations, and that didn't matter. He never threw tantrums. He never, disparaged the president behind closed door. When the president made a decision, he would just say, well, that's the decision. Let's figure out how to implement it to its very best so that the president gets the policy win, but that the military or others also are taken care of as well. I thought that was a really just a service to the American public to see how he balanced his role with the president, the Constitution, and the military members he led.
And I don't know if these are words that you have inculcated into your personal ethos, but I have the Mattisism that you are to be polite, be professional, but have a plan to kill everybody you meet. I think that's an important approach to life. Was that the culture at the Pentagon under Mattis?
Dan, I'm a little concerned that as a radio host, you had to take that on board. It sounds like you're in a very dangerous environment. But,
exactly.
I think that when you think about that quote, what he's really saying is just be prepared. When I grew up as a kid, I grew up in North Texas. I had a great family who just, they care about American values. One of the things my father got me into was Boy Scouts, and I had a chance to become an Eagle Scout. And that is one of the Boy Scout mottos, right, is be prepared. And that's what Secretary Mattis is saying. You can walk into any environment, but no matter whether it's in a combat zone or it's in your own office space, just think about all the different things that can happen and just be prepared for any single one of them. And I also have brought that into my daily life, and I find that no matter really what comes my way, I'm rarely shocked. You typically have a plan for it, and I think that others who have adopted that mindset have fared incredibly well.
I think that it'd be nice to add that to the Boy Scouts. Be prepared to kill everybody you meet. I think that it would sort of, it's a little bit more realpolitik than maybe the kids are ready for, but I like it. Guy Snodgrass, he's a retired American Naval aviator, Top Gun graduate and instructor, former chief speechwriter to Secretary James Mattis, and his book, Holding the Line, Inside Trump's Pentagon with Secretary Mattis. Guy, thanks so much for joining us. Good luck with the book.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Amy. Have a great day.
You too.
Yeah, he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
This is Dan Frio with the Mortgage Update. The Fed did it again and helped push mortgage rates to yet another historic low. So are you holding off refinancing your home because you think rates may go even lower? Well, let me make your decision even easier. Let's refinance you now and take advantage of this opportunity. If rates drop more than 0.5% in the next 24 months, I will refinance you at the lower rate at no closing costs. Other lenders state that they'll refinance you, but watch out for the fine print. So if you have a conventional loan that's over 4.75 or FHA or VA loan over 4.5, you have nothing to lose and thousands to save. So find out how much you can save. Just pick up the phone to call me personally. That's 844-775-LOAN. That's 844-775-LOAN. Or find me on the web at windmortgage.com.
Parkside Lending, LLC is an Illinois residential mortgage licensee and an equal housing lender. NMLS 176162.
Hey, does your basement only leak when it rains? Well, you don't have to live like that. Call Permaseal. I did. They'll come over, give you a free estimate, tell you what work needs to be done. They'll also have no haggle pricing and a price assurance guarantee, so you can rest assured that you're getting the best value.